All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to your first episode of Cleveland Kids Sports Talk. I'm Brennan. I'm going to be your primary host for the channel. We will be bringing in special guests week to week. Next week, we'll have June Walton, who's our co-producer. Matt Joels is going to be coming in as our hockey analyst, so let's just get right to it. Football in week 4, pretty interesting week. Had some teams make games out of games that shouldn't even been close. 49ers held the Packers to 17 points. Aaron Rodgers only threw for 224 yards and a touchdown. San Francisco's depleted defense is playing up to par, honestly. Aside from giving up 47 points to Arizona last week, they haven't really played that bad for being a second-string unit. Chris Borland, guy who retired, they spent a fourth-round pick on Borland. He ended up retiring because of concussion issues. Obviously, the loss of 2 linebackers, big problem. James Jones was their leading receiver, 5 receptions, 98 yards. John Kuhn ended up with a 1-yard touchdown run as a fullback. Let's be honest, this game should have been 10-3. Without Kuhn running that 1 yard in on 3rd and goal, then it's a 10-3 game, maybe 13-3, you never know, with the high percentage of field goals missed this year. San Diego won a thriller over Cleveland, 30-27. Phillip Rivers threw for 358 yards, 3 touchdowns. But it really came down to their rookie kicker, Lambeau. They had this. They were going into overtime in this game, but unfortunately, a veteran, Tremont Williams, jumped off sides on the kick with 2 seconds left and allowed Lambeau a second kick. And let's face it, in the NFL, you can't miss twice, and he didn't. Danny Woodhead had himself a game, 8 carries, 54 yards, 4 receptions for 84 yards. Keenan Allen added a touchdown. Over in Indy took out Jacksonville 16-3. Matt Hasselbeck starting in the place of the injured Andrew Luck. Played a pretty good game. It was actually his first start in over 1,100 days, just over 3 years. So played pretty well in his place. 282 yards, a touchdown. The one area that I'm really not impressed with Indy is Frank Gore and his fumble-prone problems. This is the second time in 2 weeks that he has lost a fumble in opponent's territory. So he's got to get it together to get Andrew Luck some time, even because Andrew Luck is banged up to say the least. The Thursday night game, Baltimore took out Pittsburgh 23-20. Something that I really did expect, especially with Roethlisberger hurt. Vic played a good game, but with Roethlisberger hurt, they kind of lose that downfield advantage. Mike Vick, obviously, he's a career journeyman. Went through some struggles in the prime of his career or whatever, but you can't expect Mike Vick to come in and replace Ben Roethlisberger like that. The Ravens had their back against the wall. First 0-3 start in franchise history. They're not going to go 0-4. You just can't expect that. Forsett, 27 carries, 150 yards. Le'Veon Bell continues to be the all-purpose monster that he is. 22 carries, 129 yards, touchdown. 7 receptions for 21 yards. It's just madness. In the early game this week, they had a 9:30 game over in London. The Jets took out the Dolphins 27-14. Actually just came down that Joe Philbin, their head coach, has just been fired for that. The Miami Dolphins are actually the worst consensus defense right now. They have 1 sack through 4 weeks. It's the first time since 1990 that a team has started with 1 sack through 4 weeks. Atlanta powered through Houston. Houston's a depleted team. Their defense is horrendous, even with J.J. Watt, Jadeveon Clowney. Can't seem to get pressure on the quarterback. Atlanta's playing well, though. I won't undermine Atlanta's 48 points. Matt Ryan and Kyle Shanahan out there as their offensive coordinator has done wonders for that team. You look at a team that in the NFC South played terrible last year. Carolina had a losing record at 7-9 last year, 7-8-1, and still made the playoffs. Devontae Freeman is really what you can chalk that up to with Kyle Shanahan. They're doing a good job of balancing the offense. Finally found a running back that can be an every down back, can run the ball effectively. Obviously, 3 touchdowns yesterday. Um, but can also catch the ball out of the backfield. He's kind of your 4th round Darren Sproles, if you will. Um, LeVar Hankerson also added 6 receptions, 103 yards, and a touchdown. Um, like I said, you can chalk that up to a new offense. The Giants taking out the Bills this week, 24-10. Eli Manning had a good game, 20 completions, 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. You can really chalk that one up to Buffalo's penalty issues. They, since 2005, they're the first team to start out with 58 penalties. 58. You're not going to win a lot of ball games whenever you get penalized like that. Yes, I saw Rex Ryan go out and say, if I'd rather have a team that would fight than go out there and just lay down. Yes, you can say that. But at the same time, maybe your guys are fighting a little bit too often. You need to tone it down a little bit so you can not give up 100 yards and penalties per game. Moving on, Chicago won a thriller. Game-winning field goal by Robbie Gould over Oakland. Cutler coming back. He had 281 yards, 2 touchdowns. Forte continues to be the workhorse that he is. 25 carries, 91 yards. Bennett added 83 yards and a touchdown. Cincinnati stays undefeated. They beat a depleted Kansas City defense, 36-21. Alex Smith, 386 yards. Macklin had 148 of them. But the real story here is Cincinnati with their 4 rushing touchdowns between their two-headed monster. Gio Bernard, 13 carries for 63 yards and a touchdown. Touchdown came from 15 yards out. So he out-touched Jeremy Hill by 4 carries. Jeremy Hill had 9 carries for 40 yards, 3 touchdowns. Jeremy Hill continues to be their goal line vulture, the new age Mike Tolbert. A.J. Green added 7 and 82. No touchdowns. Carolina took out Tampa Bay. Carolina's defense played very well yesterday. Jameis Winston had 4 turnovers, which, yes, it's to be expected with rookie woes. It happens. Mariota had 2 interceptions last week. It's going to take some time to adjust for both of them. Newton had a down week, completed 50% of his passes, only threw for 124 yards, 2 touchdowns, but for the second week in a row was their leading rusher, which the guy's really Superman out there with no wide receivers. Absolutely none. You can make the argument for Ted Ginn, Chewy Brown, whatever. But realistically, his only target out there is Greg Olsen, and a tight end can only do so much for you. Washington won a thriller against Philadelphia. It's sad to say as an Eagles fan, but with 26 seconds left, Pierre Garçon caught that 6-yard touchdown pass. Bradford looked decent, even though, he had no time to throw. Was sacked 7 times. Threw for 270 with 3 touchdowns. But really, what this was a Washington team stepping up. So, got to give credit where credit's due. Denver took out Minnesota 23-20. Minnesota's defense is really what kept them in this game. They had solid defense all the way around, picking off Manning twice. This is the first time since 2001 that Peyton has started out with a pick in each of his first 4 games. He did add 213 yards and a touchdown. Demarius helped him out tremendously with 93 of those yards. AP, 81 yards and a touchdown. Mike Wallace, 83 yards and a touchdown. But I said this from the beginning of this year that Peyton Manning's not going to be the same Peyton Manning that he always has been. He's aging. Um, Not everybody can have the luxury of going into their 50s and being an outstanding quarterback, which I've never even heard of that in my life. But eventually you got to call it quits, and I think Peyton's on his way out. Moving on, St. Louis took out Arizona, who was streaking coming into this game. Got some serious help from their first-round pick. This is the reason they drafted Todd Gurley so high. 19 carries, 146 yards. I know he didn't find the end zone, but this is the breakout game that we've been looking for. Todd Gurley coming back off that knee injury down in Georgia. Tavon Austin stepped up big time today. 6 receptions, 96 yards, 2 TDs. Chris Johnson, 16 carries for 83 yards for Arizona. Larry Fitz continues his comeback prowess with 7 receptions, 99 yards. I know he didn't find the end zone, but the guy is absolutely tearing it up lately. In Sunday night game, New Orleans took out Dallas 26-20. Drew Brees threw his first career overtime touchdown, which is pretty incredible for a guy who is now the quickest to 400 career touchdown passes, with C.J. Spiller adding the game-winning touchdown for 80 yards on the second play of overtime. Prediction for the Monday night game, pretty simple here. It's Seattle versus Detroit. I think Seattle just crunches on Dallas. Or Detroit, my apologies on that one. Cam Chancellor's back. They played as a rejuvenated secondary last week whenever he did come back. So look for Cam Chancellor to be the X factor in that secondary. And I got it at 27-20 Seattle. Looking ahead to Week 5, we have Indy versus Houston for the Thursday night game. I think Indy takes this one. Andrew Luck hopefully will be back. They're saying positive things, so I'm hoping that Andrew Luck comes back so that he can try and improve on what has been a shaky start to the NFL season for him, to say the least. The guy's banged up, taking sacks like crazy, and whenever he doesn't take a sack, he's getting rushed and having to throw picks. Honestly, he's forcing the ball into the secondary. Buffalo versus Tennessee. Buffalo coming off a tough loss to the Giants. I think they do improve on their penalty issues. Defense is still stout as could be. I understand that if they do have penalties throughout the game, that Tennessee can definitely capitalize. Marcus Mariota, Harry Douglas, even Kendall Wright coming in for Tennessee. They're a strong team. Baltimore versus Cleveland. Baltimore 1-3. Cleveland 1-3. I got Baltimore taking this game. Big win to go up to to get their first win of the season. Avoid their first franchise 0-4 start. John Harbaugh is actually has the second longest streak for not having a 4-game losing streak in their coaching career. So, like I said, Baltimore going to take this one, even with Steve Smith already being rolled out. Cleveland has a pretty beat-up secondary right now. Tayshaun Gibson left the game this week versus San Diego with an injury. Joe Hayden didn't play. I think Baltimore takes this one with ease. Kansas City versus Chicago. I feel like it's going to be a shootout. Neither of them really have notable defenses. Kansas City did have a pretty sought-after defense. But with all the injuries that they have, Tyvon Branch is starting as their slot corner. Marcus Peters, I know he's a playmaker, but the guy can be a liability in coverage at times. Jay Cutler coming back. I still think Kansas City holds on in a shootout, probably 35-31, my guess. Seattle versus Cincinnati. I got Cincinnati in this one strictly because Cincinnati's making a run this year. They're going to make it a point to win that division. A very tough division regardless of how you chop it up. I don't need to look at records, anything, to tell you that the AFC North is a tough division. 4-0, they're going to continue to 5-0 with play Andy Dalton, and their running backs really, really stepping up. St. Louis versus Green Bay. St. Louis, great defense, held a tough Arizona team to 22 points this week, and you you may not say they held them to 22 points because they still gave up 22 points, but Arizona, what they showed last week against San Francisco, they can put up points in a hurry. Um, but in the end, I got Green Bay. I don't think St. Louis has the offense to really keep up with Green Bay. Aaron Rodgers, Randall Cobb, that's all you really need to say. Eddie Lacy, they're going to win this one. Jacksonville versus Tampa Bay, which is really the battle of the scrubs, to be honest with you. Jacksonville's played well. I got Jacksonville in this game. Blake Bortles stepped up, eliminated the turnovers this season. Yes, they haven't had the wins that they need or want, whatever, but Jacksonville's on the way up. I see them in Oakland as competitors in the next 3 to 4 years. New Orleans versus Philadelphia. Initially, I would have told you I think Philly had this game before I watched yesterday. Philadelphia's defense is banged up. You got injuries to Kiko. You got injuries to Michael Kendricks. Byron Maxwell left the game. Fletcher Cox, I don't even know what happened to him in the middle of the game. Dude looked like he got knocked out and ended up going back in there. Said Thornton might be coming back this week. Who knows? But a really depleted defense. And Drew Brees coming back and played really well last night. I got New Orleans in that one. Washington versus Atlanta. This is no question for me. Atlanta is playing some of the best football I have watched in recent memory. Revitalized offense is all I really need to say. Julio Jones leading the pack over there. Arizona versus Detroit. I got Arizona. Like I said earlier, Arizona can put up points in a hurry. Detroit, their offense just isn't the same as it has been in recent years. It's struggling. New England versus Dallas. I understand that Dallas gets Greg Hardy and Rolando McClain back, but they also lost Orlando Scandrick already. Sean Lee has a concussion, so he'll have to go through the NFL's concussion protocol. Lost Lance Dunbar last night to what they're saying is an ACL and MCL injury, so ultimately that's season ending. There's your change of pace back. The guy last week just went for 10 receptions and 100 yards, and he was rushing for another 54 last night. So you lose your change of pace back. You really only have the same style running back with Joseph Randle and Darren McFadden. I understand Joseph Randle he can burrow through defensive lines, but Darren McFadden is the combination of both. So you lose your change of pace. Neither of these guys are really pass catchers. Denver versus Oakland. I'm going with the upset here. I'm going with Oakland. I think Derek Carr and Amari Cooper are really starting to get into their own. Touchdown passes in each of the last 3 weeks. And with Latavius Murray, I understand he fumbled this week, only went for 49 yards. But the week before that, everybody was praising him for going for 150 yards. You know, you're going to have up and down weeks with young guys. So I got Oakland in this one. San Francisco versus the Giants. I got the Giants coming off a big win against Buffalo. San Francisco, obviously, what I said earlier, they're a really depleted team. Between all the retirements and the injuries, I'm staying with New York and Odell Beckham. Monday night game, Pittsburgh versus San Diego. I am going to take Pittsburgh in this one. San Diego had some serious serious injuries on defense with Brandon Flowers and the concussion. They said Barrett was going to be available for the game, but he didn't play a single snap, so we don't really know the seriousness of that injury. So they only had 2 healthy wide receivers left after that game, with Malcolm Floyd having his own injury. I think he had a concussion as well. And they lost 2 of their receivers throughout that game. So Ladarius Green was lining up as their slot receiver. So I'm going Pittsburgh here, even with Big Ben out. Moving on to college football. Ohio State retaining their number 1 status. They had a rough week. They ended up winning 34-27. Cardale Jones, 18 to 27 for 245 with a touchdown and a pick. Personally, I think they need to start JT Barrett. I'm not Urban Meyer. But JT Barrett is what got them to the point where they were at last season. And they want to write him off as soon as Cardale Jones wins a national championship. Ultimately, you can stack that national championship up to a great defense. Their defense is stout. But when are you going to learn to feed Ezekiel Elliott? The guy is an absolute monster. 23 carries, 274 yards, 3 touchdowns. Are you kidding me? Why are you not giving this guy 35 touches a game? Why do you even need to pass the ball? Pass the ball 20 times like Pittsburgh did with Mike Vick. You have one of the best running backs, probably the best running back in college football, and 23 carries seems insufficient for this guy. Xander Delmont for Indiana added 7 carries, 98 yards, and a touchdown, but ultimately wasn't enough. Indiana's defense let them down in the second half, only giving up 6 points at halftime, but Ohio State rallied at half, went up 34-27. Michigan State took out Purdue 24-21. Markel Jones, 22 for 157 and 2 touchdowns. L.J. Scott had himself a day, 18 carries, 146 yards, and 2 touchdowns for Michigan State. Biggest surprise to me was number 25, Florida, taking out Ole Miss 38-10. Chad Kelly looked really bad in this game. 26 of 40, passing the ball 40 times. Florida can just sit back and zone defense and cruise. He also added 15 carries for 40 yards. But Will Grier for Florida, 24-29, 271 yards and 4 touchdowns. I applaud you, sir. I applaud you. Playing some tough football right now. TCU absolutely demolished the Longhorns, 50-7. Dante Foreman was the only bright spot for Texas, 18 carries for 112 yards, which it's to be expected with that Texas team right now. This is the worst start they've had since into the 50s, 1956 to be exact. But Trayvon Boykin, have yourself a game, son. 20 completions, 332 yards, 5 touchdowns, 4 of those touchdowns to Kavontae Turpin. That's quite the combination. Number 13, Alabama upset Georgia 38-10. UCLA got beat by Arizona State 38-28. Number 12, Clemson upset number 6, Notre Dame 24-22 in the game of the week. I was pulling for Notre Dame in this game. I like Notre Dame a lot, but ultimately Clemson too much to handle. A&M held on to beat Mississippi State 30-17. Iowa upset number 19 Wisconsin 10-6 in a defensive matchup, and Oklahoma number 15 held on to beat 23 West Virginia 44-24. Some upsets throughout college football atmosphere. Top 2 teams had some tough matchups this week. Indiana's definitely no slouch. I'll give them that. But again, Ezekiel Elliott is just a freak, and Urban Meyer, you need to feed that man the ball. Feed it to him. Michigan State beat Purdue by 3 points. Looked like a pretty down week for Michigan State, personally. And obviously, Ole Miss, come on. You're the number 3 team in the country. You took out Alabama. I understand everyone wants to say that Alabama's not the team that they were last year. Alabama got shown how good they were last year by Ohio State. They got destroyed, demolished. Ezekiel Elliott put up 250 yards on what they said was the best run defense in college football. And I think right now Alabama's just getting exposed for what they are. But personal opinion, whatever. Moving on to baseball. The playoff matchups are set. 1-game wild card. In the American League, it's going to be New York versus Houston. You got Masahiro Tanaka going up against Dallas Keuchel. Um, yes, I understand how good Dallas Keuchel has been this year, but look at his numbers at home versus his numbers on the road. I'm taking New York getting in. They're going to be the last in the American League. Now going over here on the National League, you got Pittsburgh versus Chicago. Chicago's a good young team. Jake Arrieta pitching against Pittsburgh this year is 3-1 with a 0.75 ERA and 5 starts, one no decision. I got Chicago taking this one. The 3 teams in the American League that were locked are the Kansas City Royals and Central. Again, the Royals had a great year, really good young talent. I expect them to do well. Toronto actually won the AL East. It's their first division title since 2003. Solid pitching out there. That's pretty much what you can chalk that up to, and an amazing uh, top 5 batters. The Rangers won the West, taking out Los Angeles last night to confirm that they are the AL West champions. National League locks are St. Louis over in the NL Central. They were the only 100-game winner in baseball this season, so props to them. The Dodgers out there in the West with that 1-2 punch with Kershaw and Greinke. And the Mets actually won the East. If the Yankees do end up losing, this will be the first time that the Mets are in the playoffs and the Yankees are not since 1996. So we'll see how they end up. Ultimately, my World Series prediction, it's going to be the Dodgers over the Royals, 4-2. I think what the Dodgers are doing out there with Kershaw and Greinke is going to be great throughout the playoffs. They're both going to be pitching on 2 days rest. That way you don't have to run through a 5-man rotation. They're going to run a 4-man rotation. So obviously, 2 of the best pitchers in baseball right now, pitching every 2 days, you're gonna struggle. You're gonna have a hard time. Moving over to MMA, UFC 192. Cormier took out Gustafsson via split decision. What it proved is that both those guys have the heart to be a champion versus John Jones, who just wants to use his abilities to party and do whatever he wants to do, essentially. So hats off to those 2 gentlemen. Co-main event, Ryan Bader took out Rashad Evans, which it was sad to watch because I'm a huge Rashad Evans fan. Unanimous decision. It was pretty much a night of decisions. The KO and the TKO of the night actually came in the second fight of the night, and it was the only knockout on the main card. Benavidez, another unanimous decision win. And the big shocker to me that night was Juliana Pena. Don't get me wrong, faith and skills of the girl, but why are you, as your first UFC fight, why are you calling out Ronda Rousey? Don't call me a Ronda Rousey fan because I'm not. Think it's great for what she does for women's sports. I'm just not a fan of how she has to victimize herself against every opponent she has. Why are you going to call out Ronda Rousey, who's undoubtedly the most dominant female athlete in the world right now? That's stupid. Big headline was the co-main event actually had to get pulled. Johnny Hendricks got rushed to the hospital. Mid-weight cut for his bout with Tyron Woodley. Huge Woodley fan, so I was kind of upset to see this match get scratched. But again, you got to look out for yourself. Johnny Hendricks with kidney stones, intestinal blockage. So it's sad to see, but Dana White has already promised that Tyron Woodley will get the next title shot against the winner of Carlos Condit and Robbie Lawler at UFC 195. So we'll see how that match shakes out. I'd love to see a Robbie Lawler Tyron Woodley fight. But again, Condit's no walk in the park. So we'll see how that goes. My controversial topic of the week is going to be Nick Diaz's 5-year ban from mixed martial arts. Nevada State Athletic Commission, you fucked this up. Absolutely. How are you going to... I understand that Nick Diaz is not the face of MMA. He's never been about what the media wants him to do or what the UFC wants him to do. Missing press conferences, blah, 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 calling out George St. Pierre after losses. Whatever. I don't care what the guy does outside as long as he's in the octagon putting on a show, and he does every time. Popped hot for marijuana. Whatever. It's legal in how many states now? And it's being voted on in countless others. I understand that you want to hold your sport and hold your sanctioning to a higher standard than that. But how are you going to give him a 5-year ban for marijuana use and give John Jones a 1-year ban for cocaine? That is absolute madness to me. Just because Nick Diaz is not the face of MMA like John Jones does not mean he doesn't deserve a fair trial. 5 years? 5 years. You give John Jones a year after a DUI, hit and run, a DUI hitting a fixed object, and then failing his drug test after the Cormier fight. Speaking of, great job on Daniel Cormier defending the belt. Showed serious heart in that fight, both of you guys. Back to it. John Jones deserves to be booted from the sport for everything that he has done to make the UFC have to cover up his nonsense. He's the wonder boy of the UFC because he's such a young champion and he's, held the belt for so many straight fights. I don't care. I'm so sick of seeing entitled little children be in the UFC. And then he wants to make the snide remark after UFC 192 that I miss it, ... I think. Like, if that's really how you feel, if you aren't out there grinding, knowing how much you miss that belt and how much you miss the sport, then don't come back. We don't need you. Nobody wants you. I don't care how many fans you have. The UFC does not need you. The light heavyweight division is stacked without you. So, we don't need you. Golf, the Ryder Cup opens up over in Korea October 8th to the 11th, so we'll have coverage on that. Like I said, with hockey starting, we're bringing in a second person to cover the analytics on hockey. Will be Matt Joels. That's going to wrap up episode 1. Stay tuned for episode 2. We will have a special guest, our co-producer, June Walton. So stay tuned. Cleveland Sports Kid signing off.